Hey everybody, Real World Prepper here, and today I'd like to go over some prepper mistakes and how we might avoid them. Please join me. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, of course I look at a lot of videos, read a lot of articles, etc. on prepping and current events and all kinds of things. You guys know this if you've been following my channel at all. I came across an article recently that talked about some prepper mistakes, and so I've got that article and I've got a lot of notes made because this was not an all-inclusive. I don't think there is an all-inclusive list of mistakes, just like I don't think there's an all-inclusive list of things that we can be doing. You know, it's sort of a, you've heard me say, maybe not, but I'll say it. You turn over a new leaf and there's 3 or 4 other leaves needing turned over, you know. Any adage like that kind of would explain sort of what it's like to be a prepper. You know, for every scenario that you plan for, you know, there's 2 more that you haven't thought of, and it can be daunting. It can be, you know, it can run you crazy if you let it. And so don't be consumed by this. Be prepared, live your life. This is the real world prepper, and so in the real world you've got lots of other things to consider in your life. So prepping should certainly be high on the list. You know, God, family, zombies got a list. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but I kind of agree with it. But God first, you and your family next, okay? When it comes to everything in life, not just prepping. But anyway, just wanted to go over a little bit of this, and I'm not going to get to everything I'd like to in one video, but maybe we can come back. However, let's start like this. The longer you prep, if you're already a prepper, the longer you prep, the more you realize how easily you can get sidetracked at times prepping for things and focusing on things that in the big picture are of relatively low priority, you know, as it pertains to prepping and after the SHTF, you know, way of life that, of course, we don't know what that looks like. You know, we can speculate, but, you know, if and until we're ever there, you just don't know. So it's no wonder that there are a lot of mistakes that are possible. You can find a lot of videos on prepper mistakes and things like that. So I've looked at a good few of any of them, and you can learn something from them. Even if you're already a pretty seasoned prepper, there's some things you can learn. Let me just start. One thing, I guess I'll call this number 1. Planning. Failure to perform a risk analysis and prepping for the most likely disruptive events first. Okay? So what that essentially means is when you're first getting started prepping, it's easy to go off just, and you've heard me even say these things, all sorts of calamities, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, terrorist attacks, pandemics, nuclear meltdowns, civil war, or disobedience at least. You know, you think too much about all of these things and you try and prepare for each one of these things individually, it can drive you nuts, okay? So what I would recommend is that the first step you take is evaluate the likely risks that are specific to your geographical area and your personal domestic situation. So, most of the population of the United States lives in big cities, in or around big populated areas. If you look at any geographical map or demographic map, however you want to call it, you know, you see concentrations of the majority of the population. You know, statistically speaking, you can find this. Live in big cities or around big cities. There's far fewer numbers that live in rural areas. So so if you're going to, so if you're one of these people that live in a highly populated area, there are most cities, towns, certainly your state, maybe even your county. There are websites and there's various resources that the governmental agencies offer that are emergency management ideas and things. As much as we as preppers, a lot of us anyway, you know, we've got this sort of touch and go relationship with our government and what we believe or don't believe about our government and their benevolence or lack thereof. Regardless of all of that, some of these resources can be helpful. So not a bad idea to check out the resources in your local area. You might can find out where storm shelters are that you didn't know existed, food banks, and, you know, all sorts of things. Okay. Also, you can find out, if you don't already know what it is, if say you're new to an area, you can find out what the what's the word I'm looking for? You know, the occurrence, the number of occurrences of, say, weather events or things. You can find out what's going on in that area, be it crime or weather or things that area is subjected to and has to deal with. So take advantage of those public resources. Don't stop there, though. Take a look at your own demographics, like I say, and try and identify where, like, gangs hang out, you know, and where mobs are broken out. If you've seen that kind of thing in the news, we're talking about big cities again here, or highly populated areas, or even terrorist attacks. You know, if you're in New York City, for example, you're way more susceptible to terrorist attacks than, you know, than many other areas. Okay, not that anybody's immune, but you get the idea of what I'm talking about. Also, consider your job and jobs around you and your money situation, your financial situation, and whether or not you can get by if you were to lose your job tomorrow, you know, or not have a job to go to, or not have a way to get there, or no longer is that a thing that society's doing. So, you know, and then there we go. This is why we prep, you know. So money, check out my video on radical ideas for the coming collapse. I talk a little bit about my plan for hopefully some financial stability or value-based system. So anyway, for most people, there's going to be a budget, a prepping budget. So all these things pertain to this number one, failure to perform a risk analysis. You just need to look at your own situation, your own area, specific to you and where you are, and try and come up with the best suited plan for where you are. It's different, you know, on the East Coast than it is on the West Coast. It's different, you know, up in the northern states than it is in the southern states. You know, weather, topography, everything, you know, it's different. So let's go right into number two, not keeping your set of emergency documents up to date. This is one of the most common mistakes. I am guilty of this mistake. It takes a lot of work to gather documents, to scan them or copy them or store them, whatever the case may be. You know, maybe a flash drive or a duplicated flash drive, or laminates in a safe, or I don't know, whatever it is. Documents, you know, you never know what scenario is going to come about. So you may need to have your birth certificate, your driver's license, you know, carry permits if you got them, medical information, just anything, you know, passports, etc. You might want to keep these things around. A lot of us in the prepping world, you know, assume that when everything breaks down, none of this is going to matter. It's all going to be flying by the seat of your pants, and that very well may be the case. However, if it's not, or if, you know, a system starts getting put back together, which I believe inevitably will happen, you know, if things break down at some point, some type of system is going to come back online, be it localized or federalized or anywhere in between. So you want to have this kind of stuff. Number three, this one I find very important to me personally: failure to provide instructions for those that are left behind. Let's say you know, you're the man of the house, so to speak, and you're the head of the household, and you're coming up with the plans. Your family's on board and everything, but like I'll give you in my case, my wife largely depends on me to come up with the plans, to decide how we're going to do things, how we're going to store things, what we're going to store, what type of things we plan for, you know, what our game plan is, should we not be at home when an event goes down, because we're a bug-in family at this point. You know, so home base is where we would want to get. So, and I can tell you that this is not something, number three, failure to provide instructions for those that are left behind. This is not something that that I'm guilty of in this instance, because my wife is very schooled on what to do and where to go, what to do, how to do it. But that being said, I'll give you an example. We went, and I've mentioned this in another video, or my wife on prepping on a budget, I think was what I called that video. My wife found a treasure trove of stuff from a former prepper, a guy that had died. And his family, he was an older man, and his family, his adult son and their family, they were going through his stuff and having a yard sale. And apparently the family, the remaining family weren't believers, let's say, because they didn't want to keep this stuff. But there's a whole lot of good stuff that we got for practically nothing that my wife picked up at a yard sale. They literally told her to fill up a box, and gave her just a small dollar amount. And there was ammo cans, and there was fuel tablets, and there was sterno and MREs and first aid and just all kinds of good stuff, that we got for virtually nothing. So what that tells me, though, is that, this guy did not provide instructions to his family that was left behind. This article talks about learning of situations where hundreds of thousands of dollars unopened tins of freeze-dried food is sold at estate sales. The heirs didn't have a clue that the mom or the dad or whoever was a prepper, so they got rid of all that stored food and prepping gear for pennies on the dollar. That's exactly what we experienced, at that yard sale that I mentioned. So, okay, number 4, prepping for doomsday, and then ignoring the short term. So, it was common back 8 or 10 years ago to plan for doomsday, to the exclusion of everything else. While we all need to plan for the long-term catastrophic type events that may happen or disruptive events, the reality is that day-to-day short-term calamities will occur. You got to be ready for those as well. A good example is one I've mentioned before. Again, going back to other videos I've done, we had a winter storm back in the early 90s that shut the whole area down. I mean, you couldn't even, we were covered in ice. Your vehicles were covered in 6 to 12 inches of ice, depending on where you were. And of course, power lines were weighted down and gone and done. And, there was nothing to do, nothing to be had, no electricity. It was a bad scene. So, and that was localized, so that was not a worldwide, obviously, event or even a nationwide event. It was just a localized weather event, but it was a tough one. So, you need to not only be thinking about the long term, big events that would affect across the board, but you need to be thinking about smaller and localized events and sort of plan for all and in between, in my opinion. Number 5, underestimating other humans as a threat. So in a perfect world, we can all get along and mild-mannered and, hello, how you doing, sir? Of course, we know that's not even the reality in the world we live in today. While things are trucking along and you can still go to the store and go to work and everything's working and your internet's up and, we're not Venezuela and everything's great and lovely, there's still a bunch of jerks around, So, so in a perfect world, there's, you would have it the way I just described where, everybody gets along and, sing kumbaya, but of course that doesn't happen. So, this has never been the case. From biblical times forward, man has opposed man. There have been and still are warriors, armies, soldiers, dictators, enemies, and foes. As mass shootings that we've experienced in this country have revealed, mental illness or drugs can make people bad or act irrationally, to say the least. Add the uncertainty and chaos created by an unstable society, and the potential for human threat becomes a major cause for concern. So whether you embrace firearms or shun them, and I've mentioned this before too, you still need ways to defend yourself. Your family, your property, everything you've got, everything you've worked for, everything that's dear to you, you're going to want to protect that. So, along with firearms, of course, there's pepper sprays, there's physical skills, fighting and things like that. Other defensive mechanisms, if it would be foolish, I believe, to think that you're not going to encounter other humans that you might have to be in a defensive mode against in and after the SHTF event. Think about how we already face these things now, today, you know, while everything's up and running, hunky-dory. So don't fall into that mentality that so many do. The majority, I believe, do. Oh, there's no problem. There's nobody out to get you. You know, don't be silly. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be naive in this regard. You know, I carry every day, you know, and I go to the same places and see the same people, but you never know. I have gone to some of these same places, a store that I frequent regularly, a couple times a week in the mornings for gas or things like that, you know, as I'm headed to work, you know, was robbed 3 different times in about a 3-month period back last year. So, I mean, you know, and I'm in a safe little town on the edge of, you know, rural wonderland. So, you know, in a place that where it's not, I live in a place where it's not the norm for that to happen. That's an exception. But this stuff happens, you know, and happens close to home. So these are just some more things to consider. One more I want to go over, and then I'm going to go ahead and call it on this video. There's a whole lot more to this. I'll probably come back and do another video on it. But number 6, and the last one we're going to cover today, disregarding the role of comfort when it comes to being prepared. Number 6, disregarding the role of comfort when it comes to being prepared. There is no reason, excuse me, there is no reason that you need to treat prepping as your own personal reality show. In most cases, surviving with bare bone basics will not be necessary if you do a bit of advanced planning. So what that means is, you know, it's not like when everything falls down, all you've got, you know, is a couple of sticks to rub together, you know, some seeds to plant to grow some food, you know, and a hatchet. I mean, you know, if you do it right, you can have some comforts, and frankly, I recommend them along with your foods and your waters and your protection and all of those things that are a given that we prepare for and store up and stock up. You're also going to want to have some comfort items. You know, think about, you know, flannel sheets, you know, that are comforting when it's cold. Think about a board game, you know, or cards, or you know, even treats like I don't know, M&Ms or Oreos, or, you know, things like that. These things can be unbelievably comforting in chaotic events. When things go down and things are all flipped upside down and you're all of a sudden in a brave new world that you've never had to experience before, you know, and you're in survival mode, it will be nice to once in a while, when things are quiet, if they are, you know, in those moments, to just enjoy some comforts. It will do a lot for you psychologically, and it will, you know, boost morale and that of your family as well. But so anyway, these were just a few things I wanted to go over. Like I say, I'm going to go over more of these. This is I've got a bunch of notes made on this stuff, and so we'll touch on some more later. But this has been common mistakes that preppers make, and I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to title the video, but somewhere in that. Thank you guys for watching. Come back and check me next time on The Real World Prepper. Bye-bye.